Tu Diep. Hello everyone. Jame flew abroad just for work and wanted a better life. It seemed like Diep would leave him, but that little girl did something extraordinary. She decided to open a company and build her career so Jame would no longer have to worry about anything. So how will she start? Let's find out today. The cold season had just arrived. The wind whispered softly through the cracks of an old wooden window. And Diep pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Outside, James's familiar voice carried through the airwaves, warm, gentle, calm. Has it started getting cold where you are? Remember to dress warmly, he said with a smile. To anyone else, it was a simple greeting. But to Diep, those words stirred a wave of memories, of evenings spent cooking together, of laughter echoing in a small, half-finished house, and of a dream they once shared, to build something of their own. She still remembered those days at the construction site when everything seemed chaotic yet full of hope. Mr. Duck, a representative of the local farmers, had come to see James about compensation for the land affected by the new canal project. If we offer only $2 million per plot, he said anxiously, some families won't accept. They lose different amounts of land. It's not fair to treat them all the same. James, calm as ever, looked him in the eye. Please make a list, he said gently. Who lost more? Who lost less? I want to make this right. This project is meant to help people, not harm them. Standing beside him, Diep watched silently. There was something in James that went beyond success or leadership, something deeply human. That day, admiration took root in her heart. And from that moment, she quietly promised herself that she would become someone worthy of standing beside him. But life, as always, had other plans. One afternoon, her world collapsed. Her father, the head of the family business, cut her off completely. He fired me from my own family's company. She whispered to James over the phone. Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. With nowhere to go, she packed a few belongings, sent her little daughter NHI to stay with her aunt, and moved into a small, unfinished shelter on the outskirts of town. There, she began again, cleaning, cooking, rebuilding, and silently vowing that she would rise again, no matter how long it took. One chilly evening, she called James. I'm cooking dinner, she said softly. Will you come eat with me? I'll finish work soon, he replied. I'll be there. Whatever you make, I'll eat. The kitchen was small, lit by a single yellow bulb. The scent of rice and vegetables filled the room. When James arrived, he brought with him something that felt like light. I registered the company today, he said with quiet excitement. In a few days, the papers will be ready. Then we can go look for an office together. Her eyes glistened. For the first time in weeks, hope felt real again. They ate together, talked about the house still under construction, about the stray cats that had started living nearby, about the dreams of a new kitchen and a better life. James turned to her and smiled. I keep imagining you as the boss of your own company, he teased. I wonder what you'll look like then. She laughed, shy but radiant. Probably happy, she said. He chuckled. The company name is DJ, Diep and James. You'll be the boss, I'll just be your assistant. The warmth of that moment wrapped around her like the scent of rice steaming on the stove. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't power, it was the simple joy of being seen, believed in, loved, yet deep inside, Diep made a silent promise to herself. Even if one day James is gone, I will keep going, I will stand tall, and I will build my own life. And then, as quietly as he came into her life, James had to leave. Work, distance, perhaps fate, no one knew exactly. The nights grew longer, and the little house grew silent. The laughter that once filled the kitchen faded into memory. But Diep didn't give up. She learned to stand on her own. She started small, a food stall, then a small shop, and later, something bigger. She learned to manage, to negotiate, to lead. Every day was a step forward. And one morning, years later, she stood before a gleaming sign that read, DJ Group. The same name, the same dream, but this time, it was hers. As the wind brushed her hair, she smiled and whispered into the quiet air. James, I did it. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to be worthy of you and of myself. Her story was no longer about heartbreak or loss. It was about transformation, about a woman who fell, who was cast aside, but who found her strength in the very place where she once felt weakest. Because sometimes, when life pushes you into the darkness, it's not the end, it's the beginning of your own light. And Diep had found hers.